Organization and control, and it is right at the top of the hour. We are going to wait another 2 minutes for the last people trying to figure out how to log in to actually get in here. So grab a drink, kiss your child good night, grab a snack. You got 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and we will be live. So 2 more minutes. All right. So again, welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, The Ultimate Guide to Inventory Organization and Control. My name is Scott Leune, and this is a topic that I talk about a lot from time to time, especially in our live events. This is also a topic that I've helped the people that I coach one-on-one. I've helped them kind of clean this all up. And the result of mastering this topic is that on one hand, you end up freeing tens of thousands of dollars a year in cost for just a typical one location setup. Of course, if you have more than one location, you can go more than $100,000 a year in savings. And then on the other hand, you also get this kind of faster, cleaner way to store inventory and of course to reorder inventory. So while, we're not going to be talking about sexy things like teeth and implants today, what we are talking about could be another $50,000 a year for the rest of your career and could be kind of a layer of chaos that you remove from your life and from your practice. So with me tonight is Tiger. He's the founder of ZenOne, and ZenOne is actually a very intelligent digital platform where you can order just about anything you need from one location at the very lowest price available in the country, and you can manage your budget from that. So if you haven't looked at ZenOne, I really would encourage you to. I just had a dentist at our last event this past weekend. I believe it was on Friday when he actually logged into ZenOne for the first time and realized he was going to save over $9,000 a month in ordering supplies for his location. So anyway, I will now pass it on over to you, Tiger, the ultimate guide to inventory organization and control. Thank you, Tiger, for joining us. It's all yours.
Thank you, Scott. I think this is one of the subjects that we're both absolutely passionate about. And I mean, I'm just thrilled to be able to share with people what we've learned over the years. And there's a lot to learn. I mean, there's a lot to share with everyone. So with that being said, we're just going to dive into the ultimate guide to inventory organization and control. And there are going to be a few subjects that we'll cover today. The three big ones that we will focus on is the dental practice footprint. So looking at the layout of the office and selecting the storage containers. Then we'll talk about the smart ordering process. So you always talk about 4%, and it's the 4% of the last month collections. but how do we make sure that people can stay consistently on 4%? And so we'll share some of the tactics there. And then we'll talk about the team structure and how to build your ordering team and approval process around it. There will be
Okay.
some closing notes, but these are the
Yeah.
top 3 things we'll focus on.
Perfect. I apologize for interrupting, but I did forget to mention, everyone, if you think of any questions, please, as soon as you think of them, type them into the chat. At the end of this session, we will do a couple things. Number one is we will go through and answer all the questions, including any additional questions you ask. Number two, we'll also show you kind of a wonderful offer or special offer gift that you'll be getting from ZenOne, as well as a gift from me. So please type in your questions in the chat. Stay to the end. We'll answer all those questions, and you will be given these offers. Okay, I apologize for interrupting.
That's perfect.
Go ahead, Tiger.
That's perfect, Scott. And then to add to that, there will be a couple handouts that we're going to make available at the end of the presentation as well. So there will be some screenshots, part of this presentation, but the handouts, the actual information that people can take with them, will be available as well. All right, so let's dive in. So first of all is when anybody says we would like to get organized or would like to save money on supplies, believe it or not, the first step is actually looking at the footprint of your practice. So we always say, you know what, let's look at it. But anytime we look at any dental practice, it seems like everyone is doing things like it's 1985. And so what I mean by that is, the tags, the rubber bands that go around the products, or then you look at a bunch of expired products, which is typically thousands of dollars, right? And so you will see that by not having the proper inventory system or the smart ordering process, you basically have a ton of expired products, which is not fun. Then some of my favorite things are basements, right? So we have offices that say, you know what, I have a second floor, or you know what, I have a basement. So I can buy a bulk of stuff for the next 12 months, and that's never going to run out. And I can always run downstairs and I can always bring it. So besides having a liability of running a basement operations and have your team members just run up and downstairs to get stuff, that's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion.
Tiger, hold on. This is
yeah.
great. This is actually a great thing. So there's 2 problems I can think of as well. On top of that, a lot of times when you store things in multiple locations like this, your team, there's so many sets of hands that's touching all your stuff. Mm-hmm. Some team members might be storing your your impression tips in one cabinet upstairs, and the other team member thinks the impression tips is downstairs. And suddenly you start buying more impression tips because you're filling 2 different places. Absolutely. And that can happen with dozens of these things because we buy hundreds of different products. In addition to that, how would we feel if when we needed to go to a hospital, some of this stuff was being stored in some basement that wasn't truly climate controlled and humidity controlled, and it wasn't necessarily touched with hands that have been completely, disinfected. So I don't think anyone would say this is best practice.
Absolutely
this has got to result in a lot of waste, and it's just not the right thing to do.
Yeah, and we always talk to our doctors and say, you need to pick what kind of business you want to be in, right? You want to be in the business of running a dental office, or you want to be in the business of running a warehouse. So these are 2 separate businesses that require absolutely 2 separate set of skills. And if you want to be in a warehouse business, then you need to have the proper equipment. You need to have the storages and robots like Amazon that pick and drop and whatever they need to do. But it's a completely separate business. And so we highly recommend that even if you have a basement, even if you have a second floor that's absolutely empty, use it for something else. I don't know what, but not supplies, not the storage, so that you can keep it all within a budget. Then let's look at some of the pictures here. So maybe somebody who is on this call feels like that this is your sterilization room. I'm not going to pick on you. That happens a lot. That's totally fine, but it's just not acceptable. This is not ergonomic. This is not making you efficient. If you look at these images, I get headache just looking at it. It's a complete mess from the organizational standpoint. But you can also imagine what your team members are thinking when they go into the sterilization room and they're trying to find that instrument that you need right in the middle of the procedure. And we have to look at this shelf number 2 or right in the middle, try to find the right forceps that we need for that particular procedure. So this is not fun. And if we keep looking, some of the things that we typically do with offices is, removing the doors, removing the upper cabinets, and removing a whole bunch of things that you see on this picture. And then this one picture I took from you, Scott, this is the typical ordering. This is why Zen actually was started, because everything we do started with just a sticky note, right? And so somebody writes something down on a piece of paper and they say, why don't we order this thing? Or we need 5 boxes of lidocaine. And so that's a pretty normal scenario for a lot of offices. So that was just the assessment of where we're at today. It still seems like 1985, but let's get back to your physical space. So all of the people that are watching this, you have the floor plan attached to the practice. So if you're not a startup, right? If you're just an existing practice, you're looking into improving things, you do have a floor plan somewhere in the office that's called an emergency plan or something like that, emergency exit plan. Take a picture of that, print it, and start making notes on that. You need to have a full flow, like a full understanding of where things at within a practice, right? And we'll talk about multiple concepts of how things can be stored in a practice, but just printing your floor plan and start thinking through where my treatment rooms are, where's my main storage, where's the sterilization, where's best to put the dental storage, and where's best to put the tip-up bins is going to be a huge start. I would also recommend that you talk to your team members. And this is, by the way, that fire exit plan that every office should have. So it shouldn't be a difficult idea to get something like that and start drawing in red or whatever your favorite color, just some of the thoughts that we're going to cover today, but primarily where are you going to put your sterilization, where are you going to put the storage? And so some of the things we will talk about today, but the two main concepts that we've seen work, actually there's three, but the two that people mostly refer to is either central storage room. I call it CSR. Basically, this is a room that's restocked by one person. And that one room is used to restock all the rest of the treatment rooms. And basically, it's a one room, right? And typically, I see that one room being a storage or a closet full of shelves. And typically, it's within an office that has the extra space. But sometimes they even lock that stuff, right? So they would put a lock on it just to make sure that nobody can access the room within outside of the days that they're restocking all of the treatment rooms. So that's one option called central storage room. The other, and by the way, that's how it would typically look like. Either it's a physical storage or a closet where you put the tip-up bins or where you store stuff, or you have somewhat a separate room. Sometimes people even do it in the staff lounge where you have the shelves, the tip-up bins, but it's centralized in one location, all of your supplies. The second concept that we've seen is decentralized storage concepts. It should have said DSR instead of CSR. But the idea here is you have your current sterilization that acts as a central supply room where you have all of the bins and the pull-out shelves and things like that. Typically, you will see that in the setting of the design ergonomics, right? So when I go to visit those offices, you will see these kind of shelves. You will see open stuff at the bottom. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of this. I don't like to have the cut rolls and 2x2s being exposed up in the air, just like this, especially in the sterilization room. So when we talk about what is the ideal or what's the best practice or what's the best for your practice, I would say, Scott, what you've done in the past, I really like this kind of setting where you have the sterilization room with open shelves available for people to see what they have. I do like the idea of blue tape, but we also recommended some of the clear dividers for people to use in the shelves. On the back of the site, you will see the clear bins or the tip-up bins, and we'll talk about here how you can organize it.
Yeah.
But this setup is a kind of a hybrid between the two, and I think it works really well with practices. Yes.
Yeah, let's stop for a second. So, you know, it's one thing to be a startup practice and design it ideally. And then it's another thing to have an existing practice where it's really just time to like reset it and do something better. So in a startup practice, when we're designing this in an ideal way, if we can imagine on one wall, we have our sterilization center. And then what about the opposite wall? That opposite wall can have inventory. So like what we see in this photo, we've got a sterilization center on one side, and on the opposite wall, we happen to have tip-out bins. We could also have, instead of tip-out bins, or not instead of, but in addition to tip-out bins, we could have open shelving. And what I want the listeners to know right now is those tip-out bins and that open shelving could be and probably should be no more than 12 inches deep. So if you could imagine on one side, you've got your 2 feet of depth of sterilization center cabinetry and maybe lab cabinetry. And then on the other side, you can have 1 foot of depth of tip-out bins and open shelving. That is an ideal way to design it when you talk about efficient use of space and when you talk about what makes sense for the flow of your employees. as they restock rooms and get new supplies and so forth.
Eh,
What, and
Can
then
I touch on that very quick?
oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
When
Yep.
you say 12 inches, so I would like for people to look at this picture right here. So what Scott is talking about is this particular shelf, this shelf being 12 inches deep. The reason is it doesn't allow people to hide stuff behind stuff. So if you have one box of lidocaine or one box of gloves, and we want to stock it, what is it, vertically, horizontally? I don't know the position, but basically it just fits one box. That means there's nothing else behind that box. Because a lot of times if you have a, like typically people will say, well, the more the better. Let's go with 24 inches. Now you have your gloves, and then behind that, there's going to be an impression material that you will never see. And I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. So Cynthia just said we can't see that photo. Cynthia, we're just kind of talking right now. So right now on the photo, you should see the sterilization on the right-hand side of the photo and tip out bins on the left. That's at least what we're seeing on the presentation. All right, so let me go back. So that is how we can do it in an ideal way if we get to design it from scratch. But a lot of us on this call may not be designing anything from scratch. We've got what we got. We got a sterilization center. We got a lab. We got some back closet somewhere. We got a front closet somewhere. We're storing stuff in the mechanical room. It's just a disaster. Everything's hidden in upper cabinets and lower cabinets. So in that situation, we need to find a wall somewhere, a wall that could be up to 6 feet in length, a wall where we can put tip out bins, and the tip out bins are going to be less than a foot deep. I think the biggest tip out bin is 10 inches deep. So we need to find a wall somewhere. So back to Tiger's kind of conversation around looking at a floor plan, we need to find a wall where we can put tip out bins. And Tiger's going to teach us about tip out bins in just a second. And then in addition to that, well, what about open shelving? Like Tiger said, we could take the doors off of the upper cabinets and convert the use of those upper cabinets to open shelving. Those upper cabinets are a foot deep, and we could have shelves there. And the reason why we want it open is so that we can see very clearly when we're running out of things. We can run inventory control using visual inventory control instead of having to open a bunch of drawers and doors. Also, you could find another wall somewhere that you can continue this kind of 12-inch deep shelving concept from. Now, some of you don't have these walls. You don't have these walls. And so that leads you toward what Tiger showed a little bit in the previous photo of possibly having tip out bins as kind of like a backsplash to your counter, a backsplash to your lab counter, a backsplash to your sterilization counter. So really the take home message I'm trying to make right now is that we're going to store supplies in two ways: tip out bins and open shelving. If you're doing it the right way from scratch, like with a startup or with a new location, obviously that can be designed perfectly. But if you don't have this perfect design, then we need to get kind of creative and problem solve and figure out where can we put shelving and where can we put tip out bins. And luckily, they're no more than a foot deep. So it's usually not that difficult to figure out where to put them. All right, turn it back to you. Sorry, Tiger.
Absolutely. These are great points. And it takes a big will. And I've been to a lot of offices by now. I feel like a lot of offices have some kind of emotional attachment to cabinets. I haven't figured out why, but even just as simple as removing the doors from sterilization cabinets, it just takes a lot. And a lot of times I have to send the doctors home and I say, let me work with the team. And then you come back tomorrow morning and let's see how it feels. And a lot of times when you take the doors off, you organize things a little bit. The next day, the doctor comes in and the team looks at it. It's almost like, oh, I can see things now. So it's very exciting. But where do we start? So obviously we talked about the tip out bins. So there's going to be a handout where we will provide the information on how you can go and find the specific tip out bins with links, how you can order it, go to the specific website and just place your order for the tip out bins. There's even discussion on what fits in each individual tip out bin. So it will be in a handout. But for clinical supplies, we typically recommend a setup where you have 2 large containers at the bottom, and then it just goes to 3, then it goes to 5, and it's stacked one on top of the other. So this is really helpful in a very visual inventory control, so to speak, because you can see exactly what you have in the practice. And typically my recommendation is, and Scott, I'm curious what you think. Usually one full wall of tip out bin is usually good for 2 treatment rooms. So my rule of thumb has been, if you have 6 rooms, you would have 3 walls of tip out bins that would look like the one that's on a picture.
Okay, well, hold on
Another
one
one,
second. Let's be a
yeah,
little more clear about this. So,
yep,
what we're seeing right now on the photo is what I assume to be 2 feet of width of tip out bins. Is that correct, Tiger?
width meaning like going that way to the wall,
From looking at it from left to right.
left to right. Yeah, it's about it's exactly 24
Two
inches.
feet. Perfect.
Hmm.
So the way that tip out bins are built, this kind of huge wall of tip out bins, is that we take these bins, they're actually not individual bins, but they're units. So you might have a 3 bin unit, a 6 bin unit, a 5 bin unit, a 9 bin unit. And we take these units, and each unit is 2 feet wide from left to right, and we stack them on top of each other until we get about 6 feet tall. We can even, we go to up to 60 feet in height. And what Tiger's saying is, how do you determine how many of those bins you need? Like, how wide should this tip out bin wall be? Tiger's saying for every 2 ops you got, you want 2 feet of width of tip out bins.
Correct.
What we know on our end, and what we teach, is that 6 feet of tip out bins will be enough for most practices. You could go more than that, like Tiger suggested. If you have more ops, you could go to even 8 or 10 even. But what will happen is, let's say you only did 6. You will just order more frequent, you will order more units per week. You place orders. So it's kind of a function of like, how much product do you store to hold you over until the next order? On one hand, we want to be able to store enough product to hold us over. On the other hand, we don't want to store too much product because that's just money sitting on the shelf. And so I think that most practices listening to this are going to be somewhere around 6 feet of tip out bins, maybe a little bit more than that, like Tiger said, if you are a larger organization. And we got a question posted. Just to answer the question, Tiger's going to give you a handout at the end of this presentation where you can download and you can see all the tip out bin, like how to order them, how the configuration works. All of that's going to be given to you.
Perfect. So let's go through some of the stuff here, and then we're going to pause for more questions, right, Scott?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So for hygiene supplies, our recommendation, and there was a good point. So I think I got overly excited. So for every 2 operatory, we recommend 1, but at some point you got to stop and decide, are we going to add a different setup, like a hygiene setup? Because I feel like with hygiene products, with toothbrushes and toothpastes, you're going to need a slightly different tip-out bins, and they can still be on the same wall, but you can have 2 sets of the ones that would go for clinical and then 1 set that's going to be for hygiene. And then I think the some of the coolest things you can do, you can organize all of your burrs and endo files. So you will see a separate recommendation and a handout on how to order the burrs, the setup for the burrs and endo files. But typically it would look something like this: right underneath the cabinet, in the area where you're setting up your burr blocks, you would have all the burrs identified, and you will have a section for endo files. So that's pretty common on the burrs and tip-out bins for the clinical and the tip-out bins for hygiene. So maybe we could take a pause here to go through the questions.
Yeah. So a few questions. So, one question is, the system's too short to reach the higher bins. What do you do? So tip out bins, it's important to know that we're not going to the tip out bins every day, like all day long in between all the patients to restock the ops. Tip out bins are where we're doing our main storage, our bulk storage. So you may go to the tip out bins once a day. You're not going it once a patient. And what we typically, because of that, then we can store things high up. If we only have to reach them once a day, we can get on a little step stool and go get them once a day. It's not a big deal. But if you are concerned about it, you might store some of the least used items at the top, because then you're really touching them even less than once a day. Next question is, where to store the instruments. That is not part of this presentation. There's a lot of different ways to store the instruments, but we're actually not talking about that on this presentation. We're specifically talking about, where do we store the supplies? Next question. What do you suggest for an office sterilization area? And Tiger, I could turn over to you first. What do you suggest when the sterilization area is like open for patients passing by? Maybe this means like it's a hallway sterilization.
Right.
Where are we going to store supplies then?
It really also depends if if it's completely open, or sometimes you've seen those sterilization where it's like half glass covered, right? So probably I wouldn't have supplies wide open for patients to see. And you're going to have to find an area in the office, just like Scott described, where you have the 6-foot wall to throw the tip-up bins in the open shelves 12 inches deep. So it could be a staff lounge or it could be a different area, but I probably wouldn't do it if it's wide open for the patients.
So think about this. If you've got a hallway sterilization center, the only wall space you have right in that moment at that area is just your backsplash. So you could potentially still do like what Tiger's showing, have the burrs there, but you're probably going to have another area to practice now where you're going to store supplies, because you didn't have a perfect design. You inherited, you designed a sterilization in a hallway, and so you have no more wall space around that. You could go, for example, you can go to a closet. Think about what a typical coat closet looks like. A coat closet might be 4 feet wide by 3 feet deep. You know what that fits? 4 feet wide by 3 feet deep fits 6 feet of tip out bins. So such a better use of a tiny little closet to be able to properly organize it with tip out bins. Or you can wrap 12-inch deep shelving, a U of 12-inch deep shelving, and you could have that in one closet. You could have the tip out bins in another, but you're going to have to look for those opportunities elsewhere in your practice. Or, a wall that's maybe in a hallway that's not used very much, or it's at the end of a hallway. Patients don't go there much. You could line the wall with tip out bins. While it's not ideal to have supplies in an area where patients might walk to, if you are going to do that, tip out bins look good. They look organized. They're closed off from air and such. They look professional. So putting it towards the end of a hallway where patients may not go to very often is still an okay, worst case scenario setup.
Yep. And you just addressed that somebody posted, our practice show off the tip-up bins. Patients are impressed with the organization.
Yep.
All right. So what's next? So part of what, Scott, you mentioned earlier, if you're a startup, you're in a great shape. Like you can design your whole space and make sure that everything fits. But if you're an existing office, this is a real picture that we've helped one of the practices get organized. And as you can imagine, the first thing we do is we open up all the cabinets. So first of all, if you're an existing practice, I would probably, I don't know, Scott, if you agree with that, but this is what we've done in the past. I would have the office shut down for a day or two. And then we basically have them buy these foldable tables at Costco, put them in a hallway. And this is another picture that we've done. And you basically take everything out of every single freaking cabinet in the office. Either a 12 o'clock, side cabinet, sterilization, everything goes on that table. And that gives you an option to go through all of the supplies that you have. And I would typically do two things. One is you go through the expired products, which you're going to see a lot. And the second is you're going to start putting a list together of things that you found that you purchased, but you no longer want to purchase. And that's going to be a visible list of things that you're going to hand out to your dental assistant, or hopefully you guys are working on this together, that your dental assistant then will take with her and make sure that you never purchase these things again. Because by accident, somebody can throw a name and say, I need a forceps this, or I need, I don't know, mid-pivocaine that, but you don't buy that anymore, right? And so that's going to go on that list. But you can see on this picture, there are a lot of stuff that we throw on the table, but that's the first step. The second step, you go through and you take all the doors out from the sterilization upper cabinets, and then you can start organizing things. Maybe this, like anesthetics are going to go into this section. And then you use the blue painter's tape to separate the shelving to make sure that nothing gets on one side or the other. And then the similar pictures here, you will see that you have a lot of stuff on this table. And then I just wanted to emphasize that you actually work with your team, your dental assistants. And again, that could turn into a great team event. Like some of the offices that we've done the work on helping organize supplies, they literally just order pizza, and it was a lot of fun. Everybody's working together, and everybody felt like now, the hygienists and dental assistants can finally get along because they organize the stuff in the office together, and they know where the stuff is laying around in the practice. And so before I go to checklist, Scott, do you have anything else to add here?
Yeah. So if I were going to follow your recommendation right now, I would probably pick a day we're typically closed and give everyone a lot of notice and say, we're going to work that Saturday. And then I would, after I take everything out, and we start looking at all the shelves. We start putting things where they should be in the right kind of configuration. Once we feel like we've got things in the right spots and it's clean and it's organized, what Tiger alluded to, I would find some sort of boundary to put on the shelf. Like he alluded to painter's tape, which is actually a very easy thing to use, where you tape a line so that to the left of the line are the gloves and to the right of the line are the bibs. And this always tells everyone how much we should keep on stock. There's this spot that's where all the bibs fit. And, if that's pretty full, don't order bibs. Or if it's getting close to low, then order some more bibs. Once you've kind of taped that all off and then you've labeled it, I would then go clean to ZenOne, and I would start entering in ZenOne all the products we want to use from this point forward. So that in ZenOne, the only things that pop up on our list are the stuff that we've now organized and said, yes, that's what we use from now on. And that list is actually, it's called a formulary in supply talk, but we're going to create a list online, and that represents everything that we're allowed to purchase moving forward.
That is correct. And it's, for some people, it may sound kind of funny that we're sitting here and recommending the painter's tape. But what I've noticed, Scott, from visiting offices, helping offices get organized, it's actually not that difficult. All it takes is visual representation of what you have and the clear separation to say, this is where we keep small, medium, and large gloves. And if, for example, you got a provider now that's an extra, likes the small gloves, now you need to add a little bit more space. With the blue tape, you just take it out, put a new one, create more space, and now visually you will see that you need more small gloves. If somebody new comes into the practice and they say, I'm only using extra small gloves, okay, fine. We're just going to allocate a small area for you to make sure that we don't buy more than that person needs. And again, it's all visual. It's so simple. I think we're just trying to overcomplicate a simple subject if it's all visual and if we can separate with some of the stuff like the painter's blue tape. Okay, implement checklist. So we will talk about, and this checklist is going to be in a handout. So once everything is organized, once you take all the stuff from the treatment room to that table, and then before you put it all back, you're going to use this checklist to say, you know what, let's think about what do we actually need in each treatment room. And then you will see that each checklist starts with the room and DA in charge. So ideally, again, you can have one dental assistant that it's in charge of restocking every single room, or you can designate each room to each dental assistant, if that's how you would like to play. But the key is going to be that you have the products laid out here, and it's an Excel format, and you can have stock quantity and daily, weekly check. So you can go through and say, we actually need, for example, wedges, the tips blue, tips black, and sealants, and then Septicane 20 carpules. So put a check every week you do the restock. Now, another reason why I love this checklist is every single doctor probably had once in a lifetime when they needed something and they look at the dental assistant and they say, can you get it for me? Now, the one way dental assistant can learn is forgetting the next time and the product is not in the room. But if that dental assistant is in charge of the restocking that room, she can put on the checklist that Dr. So-and-so would like to have this particular product in the room. And so that can also get put down on the checklist with a quantity. And every time the team restocks the operatory, they can have that product in the room. So we highly recommend that. And that's going to be in the handout as well. So, and typically when the inventory in the treatment room is organized, it would look something like this picture. You don't need more or you don't need less, maybe even less than this. So maybe this is too much for the treatment room. But you would think about, what do I need to keep in the treatment room no matter what, if I'm going to be bouncing from a procedure to a procedure. And so the most stuff like air water syringes and things like that, or injectable anesthetics, would be in the room. But you can decide what works for your practice using the checklist. And then another checklist, you will see that some of the, I don't recommend it for everybody, but we do have some offices that count everything at the end of the week. And they go through and they say hygiene, wall, something here, like the bin. And then they go through each individual item and they count each individual profit paste. To some, it may sound crazy. To some, it sounds like a good business practice. Again, to each practice, you have to find what works for you, but we've seen both. And if you are inclined to do that, and if your team is inclined to do that, it's not a bad idea when you know exactly what's going on in your practice and how many you use. And that actually gives you a data, because you're going to store these paper every time you do the inventory check. And then you can come back, for the month of January and say, all right, let's take a look how many we actually used and what happened. And did we have all these patients and that kind of stuff. And so before I go to the smart ordering process, Scott, do you have anything to add to the checklist?
Yeah, I think when you think about where do you store supplies, you've kind of now described two places. You've described kind of the bulk storage area, and that is tip out bins and shelves. And you talked about how do we put that together? We label it. We put little tape to put boundaries, and now we store our small gloves, our medium or large gloves on these shelves, and that's kind of the bulk storage area. And then the second thing you did is you talked about, okay, but we're now going to have our usable inventory, our working inventory, the inventory that's in the op.
Correct.
And how do we make sure that we always have what we're supposed to have in the op? And you describe a system that says you're going to have a list, a checklist that says, whenever we restock this op, we need this anesthetic, we need this bonding agent, we need these impression tips. And that becomes a guide for the dental assistant in charge of that room to make sure that at the end of the day, the op is restocked that way. Or if you restock once a week, at the end of the week, you restock the op with those things. That brings consistency between the ops. It brings predictability, because now you know it's going to be there, because it becomes part of your way of running the company that someone has a list and make sure the room has what it needs, as opposed to the old baby boomer way where we just trust that a dental assistant remembered everything they were supposed to remember and didn't hoard anything else from the other dental assistants, which can sometimes happen. Now, what you're showing on that photo of like counting everything, that wouldn't be something I would do in my organization, because I think that visual inventory control is enough. Meaning, if there's space on the shelf, then we need to buy more gloves. We don't need to necessarily count the boxes and write down how much we used. But if we've got a problem, if we suspect something really fishy going on, someone taking stuff or who knows what, then going through this exercise might be something I would recommend. But typically I wouldn't. That would typically be a dentist who is insanely detail oriented, and they really want a really deep, detailed process to do everything without kind of an understanding of the time and money it costs to ask people to do that. And I get that. That's how some of our personalities are. But I wouldn't say that would be something I would do in my practices unless I had a problem.
Yep. All right. So let's keep going forward. So now, hopefully, we covered a lot of things on how to organize inventory. We looked at the physical space. We looked at either your startup or an existing practice. What can you do with storages? What can you do with treatment rooms? But I think the next step is going to be looking at how do you actually order. So let's look at some of the things we've talked about. And Scott, you're a big proponent of every week you pick a day and you place the orders. From our research at Zen, we think that the best day to place orders is Tuesday if you're open on Fridays. If the practice is closed on Friday, then your best day is to place the order on Monday. So the reason we do that is on Tuesday morning, right after the huddle, you put 30 minutes for your dental assistant on the schedule to do the inventory and the ordering. So that's enough time for an ordering person or dental assistant to do everything she needs to do, place the order. Now, let's just say you're going to order supplies from a vendor that's not your typical top four that ships next day, but they also charge an arm and a leg. But at the same time, you can find a different dealer, a different distributor that will ship a little bit longer, but it will be 20, 30% cheaper. So if, let's just say, you pick a company that ships 3 days, so you place an order on Tuesday, then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, before the end of the day, before you close, you get the products. And then you can open the boxes, stock things away, throw out the boxes, you're ready to go the next week. So that's our recommendation. And on top of it, so we always talk about when it's the best time to order, like we talked about Tuesday, but also look at the vendors that you're purchasing supplies from. Scott, I know you're a big fan of a once a week purchase. What I've noticed is sometimes offices need to place orders every 2 weeks, only if they want to avoid paying for shipping charges, meaning their orders big enough every 2 weeks, so that all of the vendors that offer free shipping up to a certain after a certain amount, when they qualify for a minimum, it becomes a free shipping. So yes, you need to have a habit of weekly. You on Tuesday after the morning huddle, you go through. Maybe you take an inventory. Maybe you start putting products in the shopping cart. But if your order is a little bit, office is a little bit smaller, and you want to qualify for free shipping, I would do it every other Tuesday. But things need to be ready to go in your shopping cart to place that order. So that's on that. And we talked about 30 to 45 minutes inventory count and order. So again, that doesn't or shouldn't take more than that. And then office manager or the doctor needs to review the order. So I can't stress enough how important this thing is. And I know most of the offices wouldn't do it. So out of all the people that are listening, most people will go back and say, you know what, I trust my dental assistant. I don't think it's about trust. I think we start with a trust. We trust the dental assistant. They're amazing people. They do a lot of work. I think it just takes another set of eyes to look at the shopping cart and say, Julie, do we need an extra lidocaine? Like, I think we have enough. Let's just stick with what we have. Let's not order this extra box of lidocaine, and then let's just make sure, or the composite, and we will order it next week. So what you just did in 2 seconds, you save yourself $150 with the cement and the lidocaine, or a composite and the lidocaine. And so I think a lot of people, by looking at the shopping cart together with an assistant, can save much more than they think they would. And so another,
there's
yes.
another component to that. So, most offices today, unfortunately, spend like 8% of their collections on dental supplies and office
Unacceptable.
supplies combined, which is double what we should. And so if you've got a $2 million practice, you're running like a $160,000 budget on office and dental supplies. Even if you are healthy, you're still running a big budget, an $80,000 budget. I don't see it making sense to just have one person without accountability be running an $80,000 to $160,000 budget for the year. So the thought of your main ordering person creating the orders, but before they go out, having the orders approved is a very healthy thing to do. It takes the owner or the office manager seconds to approve it. But what it does is it gets a second set of eyes, not only looking at the things like, do we really need everything in the order, but also adding up the amount. Is it on our budget for this Tuesday? Like we can't ever order more than our budgeted amount. If we went to the grocery store and we didn't have a budget, we order more than we need. Yep. If we go to the grocery store and we do have a budget, we still may order a little more than we need. But if we went to the grocery store with someone else's money and their list, and we filled up a cart and then they had to approve it, we're probably going to be on budget. And that's best practice. So I think that's a very important point you just made, Tiger.
Yep. And then I have a picture to show a little bit later after this. Another point about smart ordering process. Again, everything that we've shared so far, there's nothing groundbreaking. It's just having the process, having the consistency of doing all these things. And then one of my favorites is no free goods. The amount of offices I talked to about, Tiger, like, buy registration. I found this deal, 5+2. I'm going to buy 5, whatever your favorite brand, and I'm going to throw 2 in a shopping cart because I'm going to get a special. Like, oh my God, you only need 1. Well, you only need 2. Now you're buying 5. And essentially what you're doing is you're warehousing products that the manufacturer doesn't want to keep at their warehouse. So you're becoming their warehouse for free, like for your own money. You're paying your own money to store the supplies for somebody else. I don't like that model at all. And so I highly recommend that people try to stay away from free goods. Yes, once in a while we see free goods that actually make sense. So I don't know, if you have a specific product, then you need to buy 3 and 1 is happen to be available, maybe. But most of the time, it's not a good idea. Try to stay away from it. And the best practice from what we've seen our offices do is they're just not doing it. No free goods. And I think the final point here is be less brand loyal. So what I mean by that is a lot of times people pick brands without thinking that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So for example, I like this example here, or the picture. And for everybody on the audience that are listening to this, what do you think happens when, or what would you save more money on, buying a vocal composite or saving on your composite, or buying cranberry gloves or trying to save on a cranberry glove. So if you would pick the product, or maybe Scott, you can help some of the people in the audience. What do you think is the product that we need to tackle to actually save money, the vocal composite or the cranberry gloves?
Well, in general, my philosophy is that if a specific brand is very important to the clinical outcome, then we need to use that specific brand, but try to find the lowest price for it. If, however, a specific brand is not vital to a clinical outcome, like the brand gloves or the brand cotton rolls or the brand bibs, then we need to try to find the very lowest cost brand we can find, because what cotton roll we use in the mouth doesn't matter to how well we perform the procedure.
Exactly right. And when we talk about being less brand loyal, we work with private offices, and I always say, you went to school and you probably worked at the DSO, and now you have your own private practice. And if somebody comes into you and says, you know what, instead of your favorite burr from a company so-and-so, you now need to use something else. Don't use your favorite burr, but don't buy a bag of 100, buy 5. If you love using vocal composite, please do, if that's your favorite product. But if you have an associate that extra large, and all of it, and everybody else in the office, for example, you have one hygienist that loves cranberry gloves for some reason, it doesn't mean you need to buy cranberry gloves for everybody. Like, you can have a discussion, and maybe you can even talk to that hygienist, say, look, I don't think we want to do cranberry gloves. That's one. Number two, there's so many other options available. And so being less brand loyal is just pick 1 or 2 or 3 products that you absolutely want to use. These are clinically, just like Scott said, clinically proven products, but everything else, who cares? The amount of pouches that we move from your favorite, Scott, like you say, Gucci products, to something that's a house brand, that's a $10 versus $1.99, happens a lot. And these are the products that you're constantly buying. You're buying in huge volumes. So that was the point. And so before we go there, there was a question, I think, that I don't know if we want to answer now or should we keep going?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple questions. One question was, are we ordering weekly or every 2 weeks? So I'll answer that one. Ideally, in order to have a constant control of the budget, ideally, we would be ordering small orders every week. That way we can always control the order. We're not loading up too much in the first of the month only to like be screwed by the end of the month. So it's every week, this drip, this healthy order. But to Tiger's point, if you're ordering some products from these kind of alternative supply companies that may not offer free shipping, and suddenly you've got this complexity of having to like get a big enough order to get free shipping, you might have to put off ordering until every 2 weeks so that the orders are large enough for you to qualify for free shipping. But I would like you to just start just doing it once a week, just to build the muscle that says you can control your budget. And then after you've proven that you could actually control the budget and you're mature enough as a business to then implement the budget every 2 weeks instead of every one, you can consider doing that. Another question was, how would you recommend getting supplies from the main supply area to the operatories or the treatment rooms? It goes on to say, I know Scott hasn't historically been a big fan of in-room storage. Well, that's not actually quite true there. So here's how we do it. What I'm a big fan of is no side cabinets, but having a 12 o'clock operatory cabinet that can store all the supplies you need in the room. And those supplies, as we teach in our seminars, we store those in these plastic bins they're like tackle boxes. And those bins are clear. They've got a cover so you can close it up from the aerosols in the room, but you can see through it and see what's there. They're labeled. And so we've got these 2, sometimes 3 little easy bins or tackle boxes that store all of these supplies we need. And so what we're doing, whenever we restock the ops, that could be daily, that could be even weekly, we're just taking those bins, those tackle boxes, to the shelves and to the tip out bins, and we're just refilling them and we're done. It's super fast and they're always organized and they're always labeled. That is something that would happen at the end of the day or at the end of the week as part of just the regular duties of your dental assistants and your hygienists. Go restock your ops super fast. Last thing here. Question was, if you're using carts, what's stored in the cart? I've heard of carts, but don't understand what they hold. I'll answer first, Tiger, then I'll put it over to you.
Yeah.
Carts are many times not necessarily strictly for supply storage. Carts are usually something that allows you to bring in supplies and instruments into a room for fast setup and fast teardown. A great example of this would be for endo. If you're a dental assistant, you know that with some doctors, setting up for endo, it's a lot. It's a lot of little things everywhere that they may or may not use. What's more efficient is to just have an endo cart, and it has all the crazy things they might use. You just wheel that in the room, but then you put a simple setup on the counter. If we need something unusual, we can grab it out of the cart without getting up and leaving the room. That is around mainly a lot of supplies, endo supplies. You could have a cart for a lot of instruments like surgeries. We're doing a bunch of extractions. Every now and then we need some obscure root tip pick, maybe, hopefully not that often. But we could wheel in an extraction cart, and that has all the different types of instruments that we might need, so we never have to get out of the room. A third reason why you might have a cart is because the stuff's expensive. And we can't put one in every room, like a laser or a scanner, or we might have a nitrous cart or a sedation cart or an implant driver. It's all about fast, convenient setup and tear down. Having a cart with those expensive things or those instruments or those supplies that are complicated to set up and tear down, we could just wheel in on a cart. All right, Tiger, your turn.
Scott, and this is perfect. And just to add to your point, I'm going to go back to that same checklist. So when you download this checklist, again, it's an Excel format. All you do is instead of a room, and let's just say it says room 1, you're just going to say a mobile cart, endo mobile cart, ortho mobile cart, implant mobile cart. And then you're going to go through, delete the things that are listed here, and then just put what you're actually putting in that cart. You're going to laminate it, stick it next to the cabinet, so it always attached to the cabinet. And if you're willing it, you can see it. And if whoever is in charge, it needs to say DA in charge. Let's just say it's Susan. You're going to say, Susan, now you're in charge of that mobile cart. And then she will go in and make sure that it always restocked, and whatever she needs to order is going to get to the ordering person. So that is on the question of the mobile cart. Should we keep going?
Yes, please.
All right. Review invoices and statements. That's one of my favorite subjects because the top distributors that you work with, I'm not going to name them. You all know them. They absolutely love putting everything in the same bill. So a lot of times when I talk to offices that say, Tiger, oh my God, I'm at 10% on supplies. When we start digging, it actually is not correct. Sometimes it's 7%. And the rest of the 3%, it could be service, could be software, could be parts, because all the top 4 companies, they love to pile things together. And if you had a service tech show up at your office, sometimes it just gets labeled as supplies. And especially when your CPAs are looking at it, if they're not dental CPAs, they just see a charge on a credit card from Henry Schein or Patterson. Oh my God, I just said the names. But essentially, they will see the names and they will say, well, that's probably supplies. And so my point to you, everybody who's listening and watching this, make sure you have some kind of a process or a spreadsheet where you break these things down into separate categories, like the supplies, the lab, aligner fees, instruments, handpieces, equipment, compliance, because that's not all supplies. You want to have a clear picture on what are you spending, and that will require looking at the statement from one of these companies, looking at individual invoices and seeing, oh, they picked the service, I got to take it out and put it in a separate category. So that would be something that we recommend when it comes to that. And then probably the final thing is, I took a screenshot of Zen, but essentially my point is, if you're running a general practice with a little bit of specialty, you should have no more than 300 SKUs in the office. If you find yourself with 500, 600 SKUs, you're buying way too much stuff. And you probably need to go back and audit. Do you have 17 flavors of topical? Maybe 3 is enough. Do you have way too many bursts? Maybe 2 to 3 is enough. Maybe, and again, we're talking about now flavors, right? You could still have your favorite brand, but now maybe we need to look at some of the flavors and trim down things. And again, like I said, no more than 300 items. And then just to make sure that we're all on the same page, again, we know we would stress this, and I want to stress this one more time, that somebody like a doctor or office manager helping dental assistant to approve the orders, it's just so valuable. And in this picture, that's a doctor that owns 3 offices, and he still does it every 2 weeks, he reviews the shopping cart together with the dental assistant to make sure that what gets ordered is actually what's been approved or on their formulary list. So before I go to team structure, Scott, do you have anything to add or questions, or should we keep going?
Sure. Yeah. There's more questions. I love you guys are engaged in asking questions. A great question I'd like to answer is, if a manufacturer offers
Oh,
buy
it's my
two, get
favorite.
one free, offer buy two, but get one free. Shouldn't we buy that? Shouldn't we do that? I mean, that's 33% off. Well, let's use an analogy. Let's assume we don't need three. Maybe we only need one, but we've got this deal. Should we do it? I would say that if we have the money to do it, then it might be something to do. But if we don't have the money to do it, we shouldn't do it. Just like if I have a budget and I go to Costco, it's really tempting to buy a whole lot of things because of the deal you get, but it doesn't mean I should. Because if I don't have the money to do it, then I shouldn't do it. Now, you're going to be able to use your judgment in placing orders. You're not allowed to go over budget. You're not allowed to go over budget. So, maybe you've got to walk away from the temptation of ordering a bunch of stuff you don't quite need yet, so that you can buy all the things you do need. The practice that always buys these buy 4, get 1 free, buy 5, get 2 free, the practice that does that ends up being a practice that is just stocking more and more and more and more on your shelf. You lose the ability to enforce a budget because you always have a reason why you spend more. So you lose your ability to enforce it, and you end up piling a ton of your cash into product that sits on the shelf collecting dust. So, of course, there's times to take advantage of offers. If you need this kind of product and you have the budget to buy a little more to take advantage of an offer, that's great. But if it's a product we don't need, or if it's money we don't have, we shouldn't do it. And never should we go above budget. But here's a great moment to ask the office manager or the doctor that's going to approve it. We could say, well, this is on budget. There's this offer here. Do you want us to take advantage of it or not? My answer is almost always no. But obviously, we can use common sense to make that decision.
And just to add,
Mhm.
I think Scott, this is so important that offices do understand and see the path. First, it's a free good. Then assistant is placing all the orders without oversight. Then it's the rep that comes back with cookies. And then little by little, what you see is your assistant is basically insisting on how the process need to work. And again, if you're assistant, I love dental assistants. Don't get me wrong. I think the problem is a lot of times is just not seeing what the budget should be and not being adherent to the budget. And so that's probably the biggest issue. So Cheryl, obviously you're going to do what's best for the practice. And if it makes sense, it makes sense. But I think Scott and I are both trying to stress on the point that it leads you down the wrong path if it becomes the habit.
Yeah. And so question about the budget was, is the budget 4% of monthly collections? Yes. So a great way to do this is to look at last month's collections, take 4% of that, and that's this month's budget. Next, count up how many ordering days are in this month. Some months might have more ordering days in it than another month. So you take the budget for the month and you divide it by the number of ordering days. And now you know your ordering day budget. And we can't ever go above that. We can't ever go above that. Now, another question was, what about for a multi-specialty office? Should they be having their own budget? That's a great question. In general, 4% applies to all specialties, but maybe we should be more clear with what we're actually adding into that. It's all office supplies and it's all dental supplies, except for titanium implant parts. We're not talking about that. That is not budgetable. It's based on when a patient needs the next implant. But all those other supplies, that's what we're talking about. Most of the practices I coach one-on-one are at 3% budget. 4 is easy to hit. They're at 3. All the specialty practices I coach have the same goal as well. If you were to try to split it into multiple budgets per specialist, it is possible if you use things like ZenOne. It is. If you don't use things like ZenOne, it becomes very tedious to do so. It's probably not realistic. Another question that was asked is, do toothbrushes and floss count as supplies? Yes, all dental, all office, everything except titanium implant parts should be in that 4% budget. And trust me, you can hit 3%. 4% is for everything I'm talking about. All right. Last question here. Do you suggest a breakdown of the budget percentage according to categories? Like so much goes to clinical, so much goes to admin. No, I don't think anyone studied that well enough to tell you, well, of your 4%, 2.9 should go to clinical and 1.1 should go to admin. No, I don't think so. Imagine you've got everything stored on shelves and tip out bins, and they've got the right amount of room that you're carrying a reasonable amount of product. You're carrying a reasonable amount of ink, a reasonable amount of paper, a reasonable amount of bonding agent, a reasonable amount of gloves. As you start using those things, they need to be restocked. There may be some weeks where you use a whole lot of paper because you're, for whatever reason, like reprinting things or mailing statements or who knows what. There may be some weeks where you're using a whole lot of other products you normally don't always use similarly. But so you're not trying to divvy it up. It's not front versus the back. It's not, well, the front has their budget and they can order whatever they want. The back has their budget. No, it's the office's budget. And we're only ordering things that are appropriate. And we're always going to stay inside the budget. And sometimes we need a little bit more of one thing versus the other.
Yes. Okay. Let's keep going. Team structure. Scott, I hope you like this. So most dentists say, gosh, I'd like to have everyone to be in charge of the inventory. Susan is so tired. She's stretched. And I think we need for the whole team to step up. From my experience, that doesn't lead to a successful process. So what we typically recommend is pick one dental assistant to run your inventory and ordering. I typically call that person a Zen master, right? So that's your person that's in charge of your ordering, in charge of your inventory. And then that person, once they're fully trained, once you've reviewed a bunch of orders with them together, they need to have another DA as the apprentice in case your Zen master goes on vacation, in case Zen master gets sick. You need somebody like an apprentice helping the other person to even unpack the boxes and put invoices away and whatever that could be the case. So again, the idea of having everybody to be responsible means nobody's responsible. You need to have one person. In some of the offices, I know, Scott, you covered on the last seminar, the idea of bonuses, which we're not going to cover today. But if you are planning to implement bonuses, that's one way to incentivize a person who's in charge of the ordering called Zen Master. And you can't incentivize everybody for that task. It needs to be one person. And then you need to equip your team member with the tools. So what do we typically refer as the tools for the ordering person and somebody who is in charge of ordering? So that would be, I mean, in today's environment, you got to have an ordering platform. Obviously, I'm biased, but you can do your research and see what best fits your practice. You need to have a credit card. But then I also noticed that a lot of practices don't understand the idea of managing credit cards properly. Again, we don't have time to go into details, but I would highly recommend that everybody check out the platforms like Brex or Ramp, where you can create virtual credit cards with a set limit and for the specific person, and you can issue them right away so that a person who is going to take the credit card and be in charge of all of your implants purchases, if God forbid she leaves, all you need to do is just go on that platform, click terminate or click turn off the credit card, and that's not going to be used again. So you need to have something that allows you to manage your credit cards. And I know the pushback is typically Tiger, but with my Amex, I get a lot of points. But what happens if a person walks away with access to a credit card and now you can't stop it? So run it as a business, and I would just do the research on these two platforms. I would also recommend that you have an office mobile phone to scan inventory, communicate with the reps. Again, you would want to centralize everything into one place, like just buy an old iPhone, put a phone number on it, and give it to your supply ordering person, your Zen master, that she can communicate with all the reps using that phone. And again, God forbid she leaves, you can use that phone for somebody else or even yourself. Just pick up the phone and continue your conversation. And then a dedicated workstation for ordering. I know it sounds silly, but I've seen way too many dental assistants on a laptop, kind of like between the lunch, trying to get stuff done. Like, just give them some space. Even if it's your private office, I don't know, move a little bit, add a desk, make sure that they're sitting and they're properly allocating time, and maybe they have some space for the paperwork, whatever that could be. But it would be a really good idea to have a dedicated workspace for your ordering person. So we're ready for some closing notes. Scott, anything else from what we've covered so far?
Well, we've got a couple questions. You want to, when we hold off on those, you want to answer them right now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I want to answer this one. I love this one. What about when the doctor orders stuff like on Amazon or whatever for personal purposes, but they're running it through the company? Yeah, that's not part of the budget. So Cheryl, you and that doctor doctors doing some funny business for tax purposes, trying to get some write-offs for personal stuff. If you're going to do it that way, then the doctor needs to use a different credit card so that your accountant can properly allocate all of those purchases as quote unquote office supplies, but they're going to go under a doctor category on the profit and loss statement. They're not going to go hit against your supply budget. So if the doctor's going to do it, it needs to be on a different credit card, a different account. The accountant can label it however the doctor wants it labeled, but it's not going to eat away your actual budget, your truthful budget for running the practice. Another question is, this Michael says, I've worked at offices where assistants don't have enough time for unboxing and restocking. Is this something that should happen when they have time or time blocked? Michael, you know, one reason why maybe it takes so much time in the offices you've been in is because of how poorly organized everything is. I would say that when things are well organized, unboxing and kind of stocking takes moments, minutes. Once someone typically is just doing it in between patients as they just wait for the next patient to arrive. And if it did kind of back up into the end of the day, it's maybe taking another 10, 15 minutes at the end of the day. That would be something that does not need to be time blocked. However, if it's super unorganized, then you're probably going to have to do it at the end of the day. And, you know, we have to make sure that there's time to do it at the end of the day. And we don't want to go cancel patients in order to do this. But what you could do is you could get a little smart with your schedule and say, okay, if a doc's out of 2 ops, maybe one of those 2 ops will not have a patient for the last 30 minutes of the day, so that whichever dental assistant is not stuck with the patient at the end of the day is able to do all this other stuff as well. But it shouldn't really be something that takes a lot of time. That's a symptom of a sickness if it's taking a long time.
Scott, can I add to that?
Yep.
I would say a couple of things. So if you have, Michael, if you have the visuals of what we discussed, I think the fear usually that comes with opening up the boxes is, well, who took the stuff and where is it now? Like, we don't, like, I ordered the stuff, but where is it? I can't find it. I think if you have a designated area, the gloves go here, the composite goes here, we have the tip-up bins, it's easy for somebody else to then come in because the paper is still going to be on the desk. The box might be thrown away, but they can take the paper and say, oh, yep, A2 composite. Okay, the composite usually goes here in the tip-up bin. Great, we can see it. The gloves go here, we can see it. And I would say the second component is, I can't stress enough of, it's not the subject of the conversation, but using the communication piece, right? And so if somebody got freed up a little bit and can say, hey, Michael, I have a little bit of time, you can say, open the boxes and then put everything away, but save the paper, right? So that communication piece within an office becomes very critical.
Another question came in is, would you count a new computer or new server as supply? No. So equipment is not dental supplies. Handpieces aren't dental supplies. Cavitrons aren't dental supplies. TVs aren't dental supplies. So just because you bought it from a dental supply company doesn't mean it's dental supplies. It's very important once a month that someone goes in and properly allocates what was supplies, what was equipment, and so that your accountant is labeling it properly. All right. And we've got a few more slides to go, and we're about to show you how to get the handout. We're about to tell you what, offer or gift we're going to be giving you. And also I want everyone on this to subscribe to this brand new podcast, which has just been released. So Tiger, could we go through the last few slides now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that I want to stress on a very important point that, especially for the doctors listening to this, that every dollar you save in expenses equals $5 to $10. And Scott, you probably want to elaborate on this.
Yeah. So every dollar you save is worth $5 to $10. Well, I could say there's maybe two ways I would get to that statement. One way is that the value of your company is based on the profit of your company. And every more dollar you make in profit is worth $5 to $10 to the value of your company. So when we unfortunately, when we spend 50 grand too much, that can cost the company a $500,000 hit in valuation. So that's really important to understand. The other thing is that when you do things, when you make decisions about what gauze to get, for example, if you start buying Gucci gauze, it may be another 5 years before you recognize that and change it. Every dollar you save is probably another 5 years of health, and every dollar you waste is probably another 5 years of wasteful decisions. So this is a very impactful topic. Don't underestimate how important the nitty-gritty stuff is about getting this cost category under control. Another question just came in real quick. Are lab supplies under the office budget as well, like Cerix and 3D printing and such? Yes. Yes. So while you may be doing 3D printing and Cerix, and now you're buying Ceric blocks, you're no longer buying all that impression material. And when we've studied this, it basically washes out. Your budget's still the same. What's going to happen is your lab budget is going to go down because you no longer have all those lab cases, but your supply budget is basically the same. It still needs to be that 4% or less. Okay. Tiger, you want to continue?
Yes. So that's pretty much all the stuff that we wanted to cover. I started sharing the handouts. So just share the inventory guide that we went through. The Canadian offices that ask if you can order supplies, order the tip-up bins. I'm pretty sure you can order at the site that we recommend in the link in the handout. And if you're interested to give Zen a try, your special offer for today for attending the webinar is going to be the 30-day free trial of our software, which is ZenOne.com. And if you decide to give it a try, you can scan this QR code. And then at the step number 5, you will see that there's a little section that says I have a promo code. You can click on that and enter Scott Leune. And then that will let you change your free trial from 14 to 30-day free trial.
Now, I had, like I said, I had a seminar attendee that looked at ZenOne. While at my seminar, they did a calculation, and he saved over $9,000 a month by utilizing ZenOne to get lower pricing and, of course, to help him organize and manage his budget. I had another seminar attendee that was saving about $6,000 a month. And so that was just this past weekend. If those of y'all that, I'm sure a lot of you have been to my seminar events, but my seminar events are about the business of dentistry. They're very intense. It's 16 hours straight of just deep dive into how to run a practice and get rid of the chaos and get rid of the inefficiencies and have, a better place to work and a more profitable practice and so if you're interested in that, we offer many different types of seminars: team training, startup, multiple locations, practice management seminars. Scan this QR code. It'll save you 25% off or more. And that'll probably cover like your flights, your hotel. You can bring your team. It's a significant savings. Also, one other thing I want to mention is we just released the Dental CEO podcast. If you could go to that slide, Tiger. You need to listen to this podcast once a week. It will be a really good habit for you to have while you drive to work or drive home or while you work out. I just interviewed Damon John from the Shark Tank. Every week we've got someone else we're either interviewing or we've got a topic we're doing a deep dive on in dentistry. It'd be a very good thing for you to insert into your weekly routine. So please text the word podcast to 48659. Or you can go to that QR code and download that, subscribe to it. I promise you it's going to be something that's valuable for you. I promise you that. All right. Last but not least, we got to wrap this up. So before I turn it over to you, Tiger, I want to say a couple more things. Guys, if you need to get a hold of us, you have more questions after this, you can go to my name, scottleune.com, and reach out to us there. Or you could find me on Instagram, dr.scott.leune. Leune. And that is me. So you can send me a private message there. I really do hope that this was valuable for you. Typical practices save tens of thousands of dollars if they just implement even part of what you learned today. So please take this seriously. I see that almost all of you have downloaded that ordering guide. I encourage the rest of you to click on that. If for whatever reason you're having a hard time downloading that, reach out to us and we'll help you. Tiger, any last words?
I see that a lot of people are asking how to download the files, and we probably can share our emails. I'll just put my email in the chat. If you guys want to send an email, I'll be happy to just send that over the email. And
Well,
so that would be.
we did put an email in there in the chat right now. So if for some reason you don't get what you need, email smortier@scottluna.com. That's in the chat right now.
And somebody asked for
anything.
a QR code for the course. So I'm back to that slide so you guys can scan it.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully we're getting everything you guys need right now. I appreciate y'all's patience with this, and I hope this was valuable to you guys. And remember, we do these webinars all the time, different topics, and so please look out for them. I think this is a really cool topic to talk about that hardly anyone ever talks about. So I hope you guys also found this valuable. Tiger, I want to thank you for being on this and for being so detailed and creating all this content for the attendees and the slides. I want to thank you also for being one of us that has tried to pioneer this area of dentistry and figure out the best way to do things. So thank you so much for everything you do. I hope that everyone here takes advantage of the free trial with ZenOne. And of course, I obviously hope that I see you on future webinars and that you're connected to our podcast. And maybe I'll see you guys at one of our events. We are coming to Canada, by the way. Got some Canadians on here. Go to my website. We're coming to Canada. So look that up. All right. It's time to end this thing. Tiger, thank you so much.
Scott. Really appreciated the opportunity. Thank you, everyone.
See y'all next time. Bye-bye.